Ragnarok. Brothers shall strive and slaughter each other. Sisters' children shall sin together. An axe age, a sword age. Shields shall be broken. A wind age, a wolf age, ere the world breaks. The wolf shall swallow the sun, and another the moon. The stars shall vanish from the heavens. The heavens are cloven, and the sons of Muspelheim ride forth to the field called Vigrid. Thither shall come also Fenris Wolf and Midgard Serpent, Loki, and with him Hrymr and all the frost giants. Odin rides first with golden helm and his spear Gungnir against the Fenris Wolf. Thor cannot aid him. He must face the Midgard Serpent. Thor shall slay the serpent, but shall walk only 9 paces from the battle before the serpent's venom overtakes him, and he falls dead to the earth. The wolf shall swallow Odin, and that shall be his end. Hello, what's up, witches? Spooky season is upon us, and so what better time of year to discuss the Children of Loki and Angrboda. So for this series of videos, what I thought I would do is a quick video to discuss each of the children that Loki had with the Jotun or giantess Angrboda. Those 3 children being, of course, Jormungandr, the world serpent or Midgard Serpent, Fenrir or the Fenris Wolf, and the goddess Hel. So let's get into it. For this first video, I thought that I would discuss the first child of Loki, Jormungandr. But first, a brief discussion on Angrboda. Who is she? I'd like to do a separate video at some point all about Angrboda and some of my own personal thoughts, feelings, and UPG on her, but that's for another time, and for this video, I'll just keep it kind of simple and give you the introduction that we have to her as laid out by Snorri in the Prose Edda in the book Gylfaginning. And there he is talking with this king, Gylfi or whoever, about the origin and nature of the world and the gods, and I believe Snorri actually does pull a lot of texts or quotes directly from the Poetic Edda and Voluspa, especially in parts of these, but he also elaborates on some of the stories a little. Another reason why I figured that I would start with Jormungandr is he's perhaps the child of Loki that we know the least about, or at least is not mentioned as much as the other 2. The narrator of the Prose Edda is talking to this king and being asked all these questions kind of in a almost like Socratic dialogue method. They are talking about the wolves Hati and Skoll, who chase the sun and the moon. And he asks, what is the race of the wolves? Har answered, a witch dwells to the east of Midgard, in the forest called Ironwood. In that wood dwell the troll women, who are known as the Ironwood women. The old witch bears many giants for sons, all in the shape of wolves. And from this source are these wolves sprung. So it says in Voluspa. Eastward dwells the Old One in Ironwood, and there gives birth to Fenrir's brethren. And here when he says troll women, which Jotun is also kind of cognate with the word etin, and in a lot of these stories and pre-Christian traditions, etin or troll was kind of just a catch-all term for magic user, sorcerer, someone who knew magic spells. And so we kind of have this dichotomy of Jotun, it seems, where some are these giant, vast, old beings who predate even the gods themselves in some cases, and I think are more just allegories to nature itself and like primordial aspects of nature and the elements, some of those harsher things in the world that don't really look as kindly upon humans and mankind or care as much about how we're faring and our well-being. And then we also have this other brand of giants or Jotun, including these etin women or troll women who aren't really giantesses per se, but are just these women who are not ranked among the gods or goddesses and know magic. And perhaps the witch woman or vulva who is summoned by Odin to give the readings and prophecies of Voluspa itself could have been one of these giant women or troll women, but as I said, I'll expand upon those theories in a further video. But this also implies that the witch wolf of Ironwood, in my opinion, known as Vidolf, could also be Angrboda, and this figure shows up in a lot of stories and myths where it's said that either she or perhaps even Loki in disguise as just a woman or serving woman of the Aesir court were said to act as a handmaiden to Frigga and Freya and kind of work from the inside against some of the plans of the Aesir from within the walls of Asgard. In a later passage of the Prose Edda, Snorri elaborates on these children of Loki and Angrboda. Yet more children had Loki. Angrboda was the name of a certain giantess in Jotunheim, with whom Loki had 3 children. One was the Fenris wolf, the second Jormungandr, the Midgard Serpent, the third is Hel. But when the gods learned that this kindred was nourished in Jotunheim, and when they perceived by prophecy that from this kindred great misfortune should befall them, and since it seemed to all that there was great prospect of ill, first from the mother's blood, yet worse from the father's, then did All-Father send gods thither to take the children and bring them to him. Straightway he cast the serpent into the deep sea, where he lies about all the land. And this serpent grew so greatly that he lies in the midst of the ocean, encompassing all the land, and bites upon his own tail. And this is really all we know about Jormungandr until he resurfaces again in the story of Ragnarok, or the twilight of the gods. So, what do we know from this about Jormungandr? Well, Jormungandr, the name itself, just basically translates into giant monster. And he is also called the World Serpent or the Midgard Serpent because of the description of him encircling all of the world so that he can come all the way back around and bite his own tail. This also evokes some very important imagery of a concept known as the Ouroborus. And this is a symbol which has always fascinated me personally. And it is this symbol said perhaps to first be depicted in ancient Egypt, but found in many different cultures and myths around the world, including perhaps most prominently in the Norse myths, where this Ouroborus, this world serpent, circles back around to bite his own tail, and it is said that on the day he finally lets go of and releases his own tail, that will be the beginning of Ragnarok and lead to the doom of the gods. So this symbol of the Ouroborus, or the snake devouring itself, is a very prominent symbol of just the cyclical nature of life and the universe and all things contained therein. It's the symbol of life and death and also destruction. The snake is devouring itself, and apparently this is a phenomenon that you will actually find in real life, where sometimes snakes, I don't know if they get confused or they're just really hungry, but they will sometimes start to eat and devour their own tail and try to devour themselves. And if they're not stopped, they will kill themselves doing this. And so it could perhaps also be not just a symbol of death and rebirth and destruction, but also perhaps of self-destruction, patterns, cycles, endings and beginnings. And I think it's also very important that Jormungandr, or the Midgard Serpent, this child of Loki, is also foretold to be the one who will kill Thor in this epic battle. And we also see this conflict and struggle in perhaps the only other mentioning of Jormungandr in the Norse myths, which is the myth of Hrimir, or Thor's fishing trip. Thor and Tyr go on this quest to visit Tyr's stepdad, who is a Jotun in Jotunheim, and try to borrow his giant cauldron so that they can brew enough mead for their epic kegger that they're throwing at Aegir's house. And so Thor and Tyr go to visit this stepdad Jotun, and he's just really not impressed by either of them, and so naturally a contest of feats of strength ensues, and he agrees to go on this fishing trip with Thor. And during this trip, Thor also takes it upon himself to cast his hook so far and so deep, trying to show up this Jotun, that it is said he manages to hook the world serpent himself and pull so hard that his foot breaks through the bottom of the boat, and he is actually at risk of pulling Jormungandr up out of the sea. And this is enough to frighten even the great Jotun, and he's begging Thor to stop what he's doing lest he wake the serpent and basically start Ragnarok right then and there. This is also an interesting concept or myth that I wanted to touch on when discussing Jormungandr, because not only is it a depiction that you will find a lot, not only in some more modern day depictions of Thor and Thor's fishing trip, but also in some of the old rune stones. You will actually see depicted Thor's fishing trip and this image of Thor in the ship and his foot is sticking out of the bottom of the boat. But not only that, I think it also speaks to that old saying of let sleeping dragons lie. Within one of my favorite series of novels called The Symphony of Ages by Elizabeth Haydn, in the first novel, the main characters are basically taking a journey to the center of the earth. And when they are on that journey, they encounter this world serpent contained within the mythos of these novels, which in these books is called the Sleeping Child. And this sleeping dragon dates back to the origins of the world itself. For within this world, much like Norse cosmology and many other cosmologies, there are elementals for each natural element within the world: earth, fire, air, water, and within this cosmology there's also ether, or the element of the stars. Each of these has their own beings contained and or made up of primarily of that element. The elemental being of earth is the dragon or the worm, and the elemental being of fire or Fedor is basically this being of chaos and destruction, because fire is all-consuming. It will devour anything it touches. And so these beings are beings of chaos and entropy, and all they really seek is the destruction of the world. And so when the world is being created and formed by all of these different elemental beings, they take it upon themselves to steal an egg from a dragon and take it down with them deep into the heart of the earth, where the fires of the world are still burning. And there it is kept, and it grows much like Jormungandr until it is said that the bulk of the earth's mass itself may even be made up of this great worm at this point. And much like Jormungandr, it is very important that the sleeping dragon is left to stay asleep, because when it wakes up, it will basically lead to the destruction of the world. I mean, it's made up of the world, and I feel like, for me personally, in my own UPG, to start to kind of transition into that side of things, I think that this Ouroborus, or this world serpent, or Midgard Serpent, symbolizes that boundary between our world and the world of above and the world below. Much like some could say that Thor himself is a metaphor either for lightning, or perhaps with his magic power gauntlets and his power belt could be said to perhaps be like the magnetic field or magnetic belt of the earth itself, and he keeps the earth and the atmosphere contained and protected and in check for us, and acts in that capacity as a protector of Midgard and those in it. I think that perhaps Jormungandr, or the Midgard Serpent himself, could be a metaphor for the earth's crust, because he encircles and contains the entire earth. And it is said that when he releases his tail and awakens, it will cause great earthquakes and floods. And as we know, when the earth starts to ripple and move or stir or awaken, that is when we can have not only earthquakes, but also floods and tsunamis. And so I think this could also be a metaphor for things and cycles of destruction and natural acts of destruction that you would see during a cataclysmic event such as Ragnarok. And so perhaps Thor, being his opponent and fated opponent, symbolizes that kind of eternal struggle between the earth's crust and this pressure or atmosphere, keeping everything whole and contained and in balance. And when those things start to fall out of balance or out of equilibrium, much as Loki himself, being that agent of chaos and entropy, is wont to do, and throw those things off balance and throw off that equilibrium, that is when these cycles of destruction will happen. That's really all that I have to elaborate on as far as Jormungandr goes, but stay tuned, because in the next episode of this series, I will talk all about Fenrir, or the Fenris Wolf, and not only what we know of him from the myths and stories, but also my own personal UPGs as far as he is concerned. So until then, stay classy, pagans.